Hello there, everybody. I would like to introduce you to this video. Today we are investigating Yellowstone National Park. Now, there are lots of interesting tales at Yellowstone, but the question is, are they true or fake? Well, in this video we will find out. Now, I'm not going to delay you because there's a lot to cover here. 14 pages of script worth. So, without further ado, we'll get right on to point one. Point one, lake music. So, lake music is a mysterious and unexplained phenomenon of Yellowstone National Park. It currently has no explanation. Imagine, you're camping by the lake, having fun with all your friends, then suddenly you hear mysterious sounds coming from a distance, a haunting musical sound. The sound steadily gets louder until it's right above you, before it swiftly fades. This sound is not coming from the lake, but from the air itself, and this is no recent occurrence. This has been noticed since at least the 1890s. The common pattern appears like it is. The most common pattern appears to be, it appears in the morning. Amongst the hikers and campers was a story of a well-renowned geologist named Frank Howe Bradley. This guy graduated from Yale in 1863 and has travelled to Isthmus of Darien 2 years later. After a stretch teaching at Harvard and learning in a chemical lab in Sheffield Scientific School. During his venture to Isthmus, he spent a year collecting various specimens, most of which he gave to Yale Museum. He became an assistant geologist of the Illinois Survey between 1867 and 1868. Later on that year, he went on to become a professor at Hanover College, and yet only a year after that, he left to become a professor of mineralogy and geology at East Tennessee University. During this stretch is where he did his most famous expeditions, and also the most fruitful, one of which actually led to the discovery of a fern named Asplenium bradleyi, which is actually named after him, the discoverer. This position leads on to the Hayden expedition. Now, this expedition was a venture into Yellowstone and was actually the reason Yellowstone became a national park, because he decided to petition for this after this expedition. He was getting breakfast and he reported to have heard the infamous sound of lake music. And I quote, "Between a whistle and a horse's whine, it became evident that the gusts of wind were passing through the air above us, though the pines did not as of yet indicate the least bit of motion in the lower atmosphere." So, if the expert in the field of geology identified it, and countless people have heard it, what exactly is it? Well, one theory in particular is that small tremors echoing around the caverns below ground are the cause of this. However, another that does not explain why the sound like they're coming from the air itself. Now, a ranger 7 years later suggested it could actually be whirlpools of air that came down from nearby peaks, although this does not seem like it could produce such a variation of sound, and it only relate to being in the morning. So that is quite a baffling pattern, to be hearing it at a specific time period, only that time period, and it does not seem to follow suit of it being air currents, because that would appear at any time during the day realistically. Although reports have slowed down since 1905, many people can still hear it. Maybe one day we can understand what about this strange occurrence, but until then, it is just one of the many mysteries that reside within Yellowstone National Park itself. Next, we move on to a little bit more of a morbid situation. There are countless natural deaths in Yellowstone National Park. Amongst all the mystery, about 20 people a year fall into the various geothermal pools that are located around the park, because obviously some of them might not be as noticeable as others, and some people are just careless and stupid. That's not to mention as well moose, which are a unpredictable, dangerous animal, and there are people that, for example, think that it's a smart idea to take pictures with the creatures, which no one on earth has said that that's a good idea, but people decided that that is appropriate to do. Also, not to mention bears. Although bear attacks are uncommon, there is a report of a man that was supposedly dragged out of his tent by a bear, which is absolutely horrifying to think about. And next we move on to Old Faithful Inn, after that bit of normal situation. So this is actually an incredibly popular in its supernatural occurrences. This location is the Old Faithful Inn, or Old Faithful Lodge. It's one where apparently many spirits reside in. For example, one of which is that of the headless bride. She's supposedly seen walking down the stairs in the crow's nest, and is supposedly in an endless loop of her last moments before her murder. So the story begins in 1915 with the teenage years of a daughter of a wealthy shipping company owner. Fancying herself a bit of a rebel, rejected an arranged marriage for a man much older and of whom was a servant. Her father cared deeply as he tried to convince her that this man was actually bad for her, i.e. he was like a gold digger. She went on with the wedding, however, but that left him deeply hurt. He did respect it though, that decision. He gave his daughter a large amount of funds in order to help out the couple. However, in return, they would not receive any extra support from the family and would also need to leave New York forever. He believed that this would in fact scare off the servant. However, that backfired as they both left to go on to their honeymoon. However, that honeymoon would in fact end in tragedy. Her father was correct in his suspicions as the servant decided to spend all the money gambling. Worried, she phoned home for money, however the father said no. Arguments raged on every night as reported by the people at the front desk of the lodge. However, one night a violent and loud argument happened, full of slamming doors and shouting and yelling. This ended with the husband storming out, and he was never seen again after this point. Nobody would see the bride for a few days, expecting she wanted privacy after this complication. However, after a few days they decided to check on her because they was worried. The room looked bad, items were flipped around the room, it was basically like a hurricane had hit it, and to their horror, in the bathroom lay the headless body of the bride. They would not actually find this head for a few days. They believed that it was up at Crow's Nest, however they could not find it there. They would however find where this location of this head was at when a awful smell was drifting below the lobby. That upon searching, that is where they in fact found the head. I did investigate this deeper. However, it turns out that this story, and I assume the other stories of Old Faithful Lodge, were in fact fake. and was only made to build up mystery and intrigue on the deserted lodge. That means that we can rule this out of the question for a location. Now, although that last thing was fake, this next location much further north is actually much more mysterious. The story goes that in 1870s, a veteran of the Civil War and a gold prospector named John Yancey decided to build a hotel in a place known as Yancey's Hole. It could hold a staggering amount of 20 people and even provided provisions to the stagecoaches. Rooms cost only $2 a day, which is not much now, but probably was much more valuable back then, and the price also included a meal. Yancey was well liked amongst the residents and was known to be called Uncle John Yancey by them. He could also tell visitors to his hotel the best places to fish, which of course, when you own a hotel, is pretty valuable to the guest. At the age of 77, he went to witness the dedication of Yancey's Arch, in which he would even meet the president himself, President Roosevelt. During this, however, where he would tragically catch pneumonia. Whilst there so he met the president and he caught pneumonia, which is quite tragic. That resulted in a few weeks later being the cause of his death. Now, for the next 100 years, he supposedly has remained there in spirit and is known as a bit of a nuisance to the staff. He's reported to bang tins, hide things, and even unsaddle the horses. Supposedly, as well as this, a psychic had travelled through the area and had a vision into the past. Now, I couldn't find anything to determine if this is real or fake, so I will have to leave that to you guys on that point. Now, next up, we move on to the Lower Falls. The story goes that in 1870, 5 militiamen decided to explore the canyon, something that at that time was not documented very well. On the second day, however, they got stuck in a sinkhole and they discovered a small band of Native Americans nearby. They weren't worried because they were armed and could protect themselves if necessary. However, the Native Americans, instead of choosing to attack, decided to steal the militia's pack horses, and it wasn't until 4 hours later that the theft was discovered, which of course angered the men, and they set off after them. With the 4-hour head start, the Native Americans did, progress quite far. However, due to their numbers and the few numbers of the militiamen, that did slow them down drastically. They were chased long and hard and ended up being caught at the river, where they was halfway across from trying to escape on a crudely designed raft. The raft's crudeness was actually the reason that it could not quite withstand the rapids of the falls, and ultimately it would soon get pulled over the edge. Thankfully, the horses did make it, being much more able to survive those currents. Those that stand on the platform now a days can supposedly hear chanting chanting their death song and can occasionally see the water grow red like blood. Now, there are multiple websites on this one, as well as a supposed Ranger Red program, leading this to be more believable than the prior stories at least. Next, we move on to the Norris Geyser Bay Siren. Now, this is yet again another story without much credibility. There is a supposed Redditor that has claimed to be the first person to have a first person account of a video that does supposedly involve a siren luring a guy into a geyser. However, it's not him that has this video, it's supposedly his sister, and of course there are many reasons why you shouldn't release this video. However, unless that video is released, we will not believe it, because of course it's not substantial enough. It's also important to note here that it was posted on r/nosleep, which also reduces its validity even more, and of course it would be grotesque, which is why it probably should not be revealed. However, apparently the man is holding eye contact with a mysterious female figure that is suspended a few inches above the water. It's completely nude and is about 4 feet tall, with white shoulder length hair. Its skin is nearly translucent and it does lack the sexual characteristics of a normal person. Its mouth is partly open and it's emitting a low hum. Yet again, I say this, without the footage we cannot guarantee that this is true, and I can also find no other stories of this nature upon my research, so I am not going to choose to not believe this one. However, in a little short moment you will actually hear a story that is much more viable with video footage of supposed Bigfoot in this area, Norris Geyser Basin. So whether or not this one is true is a mystery, but with a Bigfoot sighting there as well, and not just one Bigfoot but a family of 4, definitely does add some intrigue. Now, upon my research, I heard of a ghost story that involved the E.C. Walters. However, I could not actually find any evidence of this, so I'm not going to include this in my video. You know, even though this video is not very long, it's a lot shorter than I thought it would be. It's important to cut out the things that don't actually matter, and although the story is an interesting one, it does not follow the mysteries that I'm trying to delve into. Now, we're going to our final note here. Bigfoot. Now, this is definitely a very intriguing one. So, in October of 1980, Superintendent Thomas O. Hobbs had received 2 interesting letters. This is theorized that this is because of a Bigfoot sighting in a recent time period to this in an area nearby. Both of these was actually asking about the presence of Bigfoot. He checked the park's historical records and he could not find any evidence of sightings in this park. It is also important to note that this is how we know that there has been no explanation of lake music since the making of the park, which obviously lake music has been reported since at least at the earliest, you know, a year before the park was created. So that's an interesting point in this story. However, there is also another clip that we will show in just a minute, and this video does show a supposed 4 Bigfoot. It's important to note that the quality does make this rather difficult to see what they actually are, but it does seem like they could potentially be that, or at least some strange people that are definitely cutting it a little bit fine with their lives. Judging by the amount of steam though, it's unlikely that this is people, and it's also important to note that the buffalo did not seem disturbed by these people or creatures, which, judging by the unpredictability of buffalo, it's at least likely that they would make a glance if they were in fact people. Whereas if it were Bigfoot, because they're more animalistic, it's unlikely that they would react as strongly. So you see the buffalo are here. Now it's important to take a glance here, which I will zoom in when we get to that point. And as you can tell by all of this, there is a lot of smoke from this area, from all the geysers. So you see the buffalo are just roaming there. Here you see 1, 2, 3, and then they're behind the tree, but you only see 1 coming out there. So let's go back here. See here, only 1 shows up, and it's important to see, like, that goes quite some distance before it cuts away. It's also important to see, I know that it's bad quality and I do apologise for that, but look, you can see their shadow, and you can see his shadow come out, but you can't see their shadow behind the tree either. Look. See, where did their shadow go? They completely disappeared from existence. So that's that one, guys. Let me know what you guys think of that one, because that one is yet again another mystery to me. Now, with that video, our video draws to an end. With lake music, it's definitely the most interesting thing in the park, and it's possible Bigfoot are in fact numerous and do roam. But a lot of stuff I have found seems like it is just a place to add attraction to this location. I don't believe there is much substantial, but it was interesting to learn this park's history through each of these events. And with that, and last of all, it's important to note that between Yellowstone Music, Norra Geyser Basin and the Lower Falls, removing all the unverifiable and unclear whether it's true or not, there is a clear distinct triangle formation. How many more of these must we see during our series? And with that, thank you for joining, and I hope that you join me in my next video, in which I deep dive into Yosemite National Park. Thank you so much for joining, everyone, and have a great day, and stay safe and stay out of the shadows, for you don't know what's lurking there and what will appear next.